Justin Fields showed he is who he is against the Buffalo Bills, and that's a problem for the Jets. Locked On Jets starts now.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Monday, September 15th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com, thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. On today's show, we are going to sift through the wreckage of a blowout loss in week 2 for the New York Jets. The Buffalo Bills dominated yesterday at MetLife Stadium. Buffalo won by a final score of 30-10. On today's show, we're going to talk about how the path forward for the Jets involves establishing an identity on both sides of the ball. We're going to talk about accountability and how this coaching staff, despite many media reports to the contrary, has not yet established accountability. But we're going to begin by talking about an absolutely dismal game by the Jets quarterback, Justin Fields. And, after week 1, Fields was receiving a lot of praise. Now he'll receive an equal amount of criticism. After that opening game against the Pittsburgh Steelers, I was excited, I was optimistic, but I also provided a warning. The issue with Justin Fields has never been whether or not he can play at a high level. The issue with Justin Fields has always been whether he can sustain playing at a high level. You have quarterbacks like Zach Wilson who never really played at a super high level. I mean, Zach had a few games like that Houston game his third year, but he never really carried an offense. He never really drove an offense to have big success with the Jets. Justin Fields in Chicago and Pittsburgh had games where he did that. The problem is that he would follow them up with really bad games. In fact, I looked at a statistic that I think tells the story of Justin Fields' career. I used ESPN stat QBR. So if you're not familiar with QBR, ESPN essentially molds it from this other statistic, which tells you how much a specific play increased your team's chances of winning. And they look at every play the quarterback was involved, how much his plays increased or decreased your chances of winning. And then they kind of use it to come up with a 1 to 100 grade for a quarterback on each game. Now Justin Fields is in his 5th year, but he's been a backup quarterback for much of his career. He's missed some time from injuries. So Justin Fields, even though he's in year 5, really only has about 2.5 seasons worth of starts under his belt, maybe 2 2/3. And that's important to understand the context of the statistic I'm about to give you. So ESPN's got the stat QBR, determines how much you contribute to wins, how much you contribute to losses. They grade you 1 to 100. Fields got 2.5 seasons of starting experience. In 2.5 seasons worth of starts, yesterday's game was the 10th time in Justin Fields' career there has been a drop in 40 points or more in QBR from one game to another. 40 points is a huge gap. A 40-point drop usually means you were really good the week before and really bad the week after. And anybody who watched this game would tell you Justin Fields was just horrible. There are games, and we've seen this again with other Jets quarterbacks. It happened a lot with Zach. It happened with Sam Darnold. It happened with Geno Smith. It happened with Mark Sanchez. There have been games in recent Jets history, and not so recent Jets history, where the entire offense has failed, and the quarterback took the brunt of the blame. The game plan made no sense. The Adam Gase era. The receivers were not good. The running backs were not good. The offensive line was not good. Now, I'm not saying there were a lot of standout performances for the Jets on the offensive side of the ball in yesterday's game, because there were not. There were struggles. The offensive line did not play as well from week 1 to week 2. But watching that game, my feeling was that Justin Fields was the reason the offense was not working, because Justin Fields wasn't just missing throws. He was missing throws an NFL quarterback has to make. And it started with the Jets' first series where Jets got behind the sticks. Buffalo came out with a good defensive game plan. I got to give them credit because personnel-wise, that Buffalo defense, especially without Ed Oliver, was hurting yesterday. It's not a great defense personnel-wise. They came out with a plan that they were just going to throw run blitzes at the Jets, and it worked pretty well. It took some time for Tanner Engstrand to adjust, And by the time Engstrand could adjust, the game was already kind of out of hand. But the Bills backed the Jets up into a 3rd and long situation. Fields had Garrett Wilson breaking open. Garrett did his job, and Fields just airmailed the pass. And that was the story of the day. I mean, most of Fields' incompletions, and Fields did not throw the ball a ton yesterday. He only had 11 passing attempts. He only completed 3 for 27 yards. On a lot of them, there was a receiver open that he should have hit. And maybe the biggest play other than that Garrett play in the first quarter on the first series was right before halftime. The Jets are down 20-3. They're trying to drive into field goal range. The Bills bust a coverage on Isaiah Davis. Davis has at least 20 yards in front of him, it looked like. Davis may have scored. He was so wide open on this play. And Field just threw an awful pass. His ball placement was off all day. He was not putting the ball where receivers could get them. You ever heard the expression, he throws a catchable ball? Justin Fields threw an anti-catchable ball yesterday. He made those catches as difficult as possible for receivers. And unfortunately, this has been the story of Justin Fields' career. And I don't think our NFL media landscape is really built to analyze a quarterback like Justin Fields well, because Justin played great last week. So the analysis is all he's turning the corner. And, you hoped, but you needed to see more. And that's one of the reasons I warned last week that, we can't go too crazy over this Justin Fields performance. Now, I'll admit, maybe I went a little too crazy about the offensive line, because the offensive line kind of took a step back in this game. I think there were issues up front. So you want to get on me, you can get on me for the offensive line, because I think maybe I got a little ahead of myself by proclaiming the offensive line great. But I think one thing I was right about was people were going a little too far praising Justin Fields. It's not like we've never seen Justin Fields play at a high level before. Now, this week, it's going to be the opposite. People are going to turn Justin Fields into Anthony Richardson. There is a group of people that was very upset the Jets signed Justin Fields. There are people who are very low on Justin Fields who are now, I think this week, you're going to hear a lot from them about how Justin Fields is incapable of doing anything. That's not really accurate. We saw it in week 1 that Justin Fields is capable of playing well, that there is a lot of talent there. The thing with Justin Fields is that he does not stack good games together. Is that when he plays a good game, he follows it up with a bad game. Because this is not even 50 starts yet into Justin Fields' career. This is the 10th time he's had a monumental drop-off from week to week. And that's the reason he's on his 3rd team. And that's the bad news for the New York Jets, that a guy who is that inconsistent from week to week is not a guy is not a guy you want to keep around. It's not a guy who's good enough. The hope for the Jets is that they can channel that talent he's got and make the good games more frequent. And occasionally he'll have a big drop off, but you don't want it to be as frequent. Now, the game ended with even worse news for Justin Fields. He took a big hit in the second half left and has been diagnosed with a concussion. So the question now is, will Justin Fields be ready for week 3 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? You hope he will be. Tyrod Taylor came in and did not really do a whole lot. I mean, I think he led the Jets to one garbage time touchdown drive. I will say this, Tyrod will hit the passes Justin missed yesterday, but this offense does not have the skill players to support a quarterback like Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor will probably avoid mistakes. He won't make the big errors Justin made, but you're also not going to see 30-point explosions last week the way you have the potential under Justin Fields. So hopefully Justin is better and back in the lineup. Hopefully he plays better. Hopefully the Jets figure out a formula to get him playing at a high level more consistently and a low level less consistently. Now, you're on the Locked On Jets podcast. It was not just Justin Fields. Maybe it was just Justin Fields on the offense, but the Jets defense really disappointed in this game. And I think a lot of it goes back to something that's been preached over the course of the offseason, the course of training camp, and the course of the first 2 weeks of the regular season. Accountability. Despite everything we've heard from the coaching staff, it's lacking for the Jets. And that's got to change. We'll talk about it as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in. With football back, Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes, all in less than 60 seconds. It's quick, easy, and a great way to follow along with football. Prize Picks is such a fun way to stay locked in for the season. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineup after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineup after your first $5 play. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. If you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Just want to give a big shout out to you everydayers, the loyal fans of Locked On Jets who tune in. Despite this team losing, and the Jets lost again yesterday to the Buffalo Bills, it was a completely uncompetitive game. The final score was 30-10. I think by late in the first quarter, definitely the second quarter, everybody knew this game was not going to go the Jets' way, that we were looking at a long afternoon at MetLife Stadium. And watching that game, I couldn't stop but think. And I thought about how there's been a buzzword that's been around the Jets really since Aaron Glenn took over. You heard it a lot through training camp. You heard it a lot over the last week after the Jets cut Xavier Gipson. That buzzword is accountability. And I think back a couple of weeks ago, we had Ian Eagle of CBS Sports on the show. He made a very astute observation, I think. He said that between March and August is a very good time for NFL teams because nothing really goes wrong in those areas. You're excited about the players you've added. You're excited about all the changes you've made. Now, I'm going to add my own take on this. I think that the point between March and August is a very good time in the NFL, and that's especially true when you have a new coaching staff. And this year during training camp, the stuff you heard coming from the Jets camp was pretty common for a team with a new head coach. You hear a lot about how the new coach has changed everything. You hear a lot about how everything's so different this year. And one of the things you heard over and over, it was a recurring theme, was there's now accountability. I mean, I can't count how many players mentioned that, coaches are holding people accountable this year. And the implication was it was not happening last year. I think of all the comments that were made about accountability, there was one player who was actually honest about it. And that player, he's not a popular Jet because, he's struggled the first 2 weeks himself. But the player who was most honest about it said, the last coaches preached discipline and we did not listen. And that Tony Adams said that. And I thought that was, of all the things that were said, that was like the one thing that I actually believed was honest, because it's easy to talk about accountability. And one of the things I tried to avoid last week was going overboard with accountability after the Jets cut Xavier Gipson, because that was something you heard over and over. Xavier Gipson fumbles week 1, the Jets cut him, there's accountability here. And I was sitting there asking myself, why should I praise the Jets for making a move that was overdue? Xavier Gipson should not have been on the team. I did a podcast on Cutdown that I said this guy should not be on the team. I said that this guy's not going to help the Jets. And then he goes out there and makes a huge play that contributes to a week 1 loss. And I'm supposed to praise the Jets coaching staff for cutting him after that, for making a move late. It just doesn't really add up to me. And you watched that game yesterday. You did not see discipline. It's easy to talk about accountability, but did you see a lot of players who were really scared of accountability in that game? I mean, we can start with Michael Clemens committing that critical penalty on a play where the Jets were about to get off the field on the first Buffalo offensive series, forced the Bills to attempt a long field goal, which they probably would have made because Buffalo's kicker is really good. But Michael Clemens commits a roughing the passer penalty. I'm sorry, but after like a week of accountability talk and after months of talking about how we're going to be so much more disciplined, and this is one of the driving themes of Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn was a guy who was very big on telling you how much better the coaching was this year over the course of training camp. Well, we saw mistake after mistake from the Jets in this game. Now, I'm not going to say I'm giving up on Aaron Glenn after 2 games. I mean, that would be completely ridiculous. Aaron Glenn's trying to rebuild a built culture. And part of rebuilding trying to rebuild a broken culture is replacing players. A lot of the guys who are on this team right now are not going to be part of the next Jets team that's good. There's a famous story when Chuck Noll, the legendary coach, took over the Steelers. He gathered the team together and he said, guys, he said something like, this is not a direct quote, but he said something like, guys, I've watched the film. The bad news is that most of you just aren't very good. And we're going to have to replace most of you within the next couple of years. And we're not going to be a winning team unless we do that. It was kind of a brutally honest comment from Chuck Noll, but it's something that's true across the league. When you have a new coach coming in to take over a bad team, players need to be replaced. Jets are not talented enough, but beyond not being talented enough, you have a lot of players who don't play smart football, and Clemens is among them. And you saw mistake after mistake in this game from the Jets. You saw the Jets not filling run gaps effectively. You saw Justin Fields fumbling on the Jets' second offensive series, which set up a Buffalo field goal. You saw Tony Adams committing a penalty that extended another scoring drive. So missed tackles left and right. And even on the first drive, the Jets actually had Buffalo pinned back on a 3rd and 8. And the Jets blitzed, and their blitzers were not disciplined. Their blitzers were a little out of control. And against Josh Allen, one of the things that you'll hear me say this every year when the Jets play the Bills, you have to be contained when you rush the passer. You can't go flying up the field, because if you get past Allen, he'll see daylight, he'll take off. Allen tucked and ran for a 40-yard gain. And you look at that game, and I think about what I said Thursday when we did our crossover show with Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. And one of the things that I said was that the Jets cannot give any presents to the Bills, because the Bills are the better team. And when you are the less talented of the two teams, you can't make it easy for the opponent. You have to give the opponent everything you've got. And I think one of the hopes for the Jets this year under Aaron Glenn is that they may not be a great team. They may not be a talented team. They may not even win a lot of games, but you're going to have to earn it against the Jets. You want to see a team that is disciplined. You want to see a team where there is accountability, where guys take pride in playing the game the right way. And it's not simple for the other team to succeed. Unfortunately, in this game, it was simple for Buffalo to succeed. If I had told you going in that Josh Allen would be 14 for 25 for 148 yards throwing the ball and not have a touchdown, you would have loved that. I don't know if the Jets win that game, but that's a game where the Jets should be very competitive. Unfortunately, the Jets were not competitive in this game. And it's because they gave the Buffalo Bills too many gifts. And look, I'm not sitting here saying Buffalo did not deserve to win the game. The Bills executed at a high level in a lot of areas, particularly on the run, in the run game. They also, even though Justin Fields missed some throws, I thought they played at a high level on defense. But to have the reigning MVP come into your stadium and play what we could call not a pretty bad game by his standards. In fact, I thought the most impressive throw from Buffalo yesterday came from Mitchell Trubisky when he briefly replaced Allen after Allen took a hit to his nose. Trubisky came in and threw a strike on a 3rd down to extend the drive. And another unfortunate stat for the Jets is that Mitchell Trubisky ended the game with more passing yards than Justin Fields, which speaks volumes about how Fields played in this game. But I did not come away from this game thinking that the Jets made the Bills earn it. I came away from this game thinking the Jets kind of handed it to the Bills. And look, the Bills are better anyway. If the Bills played their B game, they still may have won. If the Jets did not play their A game, they had no shot of winning. But what you want to avoid are those big mistakes. You saw a sloppy team. You saw an undisciplined team. And for all the talk about accountability in New York, accountability is not cutting a player when he fumbles. Accountability is instilling a culture. It's instilling an atmosphere around the team where you're not going to make those mistakes. And look, I don't think Aaron Glenn could have done it 2 weeks into his first year. My issue with Glenn is that Glenn was very boastful about how he had already fixed everything, and clearly things are not fixed. And one of the things I think you learn when you're a head coach is that you go in with a plan. And sometimes the plan doesn't always work. Sometimes you have to alter the plan. And sometimes the thing's not as easy as you think it's going to be. And I think Aaron Glenn might be learning that fixing the Jets is going to be a much tougher job than he realized going in. And week 2 made that clear. It made it clear that the Jets are not a team that's going to give its opponents everything they can handle, unless we see big improvements. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about the path forward. I think it begins with an identity on both sides of the ball. These were identities that were in short supply against the Buffalo Bills. That's got to change going forward. We'll discuss as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. We all turn to some funny places for advice. Your barista, your bartender, maybe even a random stranger in the bathroom. But not everyone is the right one when it comes to support. And that's why BetterHelp is here. With over 30,000 licensed therapists and more than 10 years of experience, BetterHelp helps you find your right match. Someone clinically trained and credentialed to guide you through life's challenges. You may catch yourself venting to group chats or oversharing with friends who mean well, but they're not therapists. Having someone trained can help you work through tough situations it can make all the difference. And BetterHelp is flexible. You can join sessions online, from home, or on the go, which makes therapy fit into your busy schedule. As the largest online therapy provider in the world, BetterHelp can provide access to mental health professionals with a diverse variety of expertise. Find the one with BetterHelp. Our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Hey, Locked On Jets fans, are you still paying full price for gas? Stop leaving money behind. Get real cash every time you fill up with the free Upside app. Simply download the free Upside app in the App Store or Google Play right now and start earning cash at the pump today. Use my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN and get an extra 25 cents back per gallon on your first fill up. You could make up to $300 just from buying the gas you already needed. At first, I thought it was too good to be true, but it's totally legit. Real people are getting paid just to make their daily commutes, and you can too. Plus, you can cash out anytime to your bank account, PayPal, or an e-gift card for Amazon and other brands. Don't let this offer drive on by. Download the free Upside app now by using my limited time promo code TOUCHDOWN for a limited time 25 cent per gallon bonus. That's promo code TOUCHDOWN. Offers vary by user and location. Go to upside.com for terms and conditions. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. The Jets lost to the Buffalo Bills in Week 2 action. The final score was 30-10 at MetLife Stadium. This defeat drops the Jets to 0-2 on the 2025 season. Now, I think normally an 0-2 start would be devastating for a football team, particularly when those two losses come at home and they're both the conference opponents. I think in a normal year where your goal is very much making the playoffs and it's a realistic goal, this would be a really, really tough game to come back from. I do think things are a bit different for the Jets this year. I don't think the realistic goal has ever been making the playoffs for this team. It's been about showing a steady improvement through the course of the season. So how do the Jets do that going forward? Well, I think it starts with an identity on both sides of the ball. I think this game kind of got tough for the Jets because they fell behind so far that they had to get away from their initial game plan. And that was, running the ball effectively. Breece Hall was really bottled up in this game. He only had 29 yards on 10 rushes. I will say this again. I like last week. Maybe the results weren't there. I did not think Breece was dancing around too much in the backfield. I felt that to the extent there were issues, maybe it was the blocking, and maybe it was Buffalo's game plan. Heading into this game, the Bills seemed like they could have a rough day on the ground because they were missing Ed Oliver and they had just been chewed up all game by the Baltimore Ravens. They came in with a good game plan. They threw a lot of run blitzes at the Jets. They particularly activated some of their corners in the run game. And when you are designing a scheme, to run the ball, you're usually not accounting for corners because you don't think that they're going to come up because they have to cover wide receivers. So when you activate the corners, it's like an extra unblocked guy, and they got the Jets a couple of times in those situations. This Jets offense is based on running the ball, though. And this Jets offense is really going to work if they can pound the football over and over and over during the course of the game. Now, there were also instances where the Jets got themselves behind the sticks. There was one play where Arian Smith, took an end around and Jets lost 10 yards. This is not a Jets team that wants to play behind the sticks because then you get Justin Fields into a drop back situation and maybe you get some of the results you saw in yesterday's game. I think the Jets, what you want to do is you want to be able to run the ball over and over and over. And the idea is that you eventually wear the opponent down and then maybe you pop a big run in the fourth quarter. The Jets were not really able to do that. In fact, Tanner Engstrand had to make an early adjustment. To the small extent, the Jets were able to move the ball with Justin Fields at quarterback. It came on one series where Engstrand finally kind of figured out what Buffalo was doing and he got to the zone read game and Fields was able to make some nice runs. I mean, really the only other time the Jets moved the ball with Fields was right before the half where he just broke a big run off a scramble. I think in a lot of ways, this game got away from the Jets early. And when the game gets away from you early, it's tough to stick with your game plan. And when we talk about what the Jets' advantages and disadvantages are, one of their big advantages is if the game does not go to script, this could be a team that's in some trouble because this is not a team that's really built to diverge from its game plan. This is a team that's very much built to run the ball. This is not a team that's built to adjust to that. Jets need to, hopefully the other games going forward have a better flow for the New York Jets so that you avoid situations where you can't really get to your offense. I can't really say that was the problem with Justin Fields because Fields just missed throws he should have made. So this is actually a pretty clean game to break down offensively, because while there were guys who did not play well, while there were plays that were not made, a lot of it just goes back to the quarterbacks got to hit passes where receivers are open. But one thing that will help this offense going forward is, this game not turning into a blowout early, so the Jets have to diverge from their game plan, and hopefully they'll be able to run the ball, get back to what they did week 1 against the Pittsburgh Steelers going forward. On the defensive side of the ball, what bothered me, aside from the dumb penalties, aside from the silly mistakes, the Jets got gashed in the run game. Buffalo ran the ball 43 times for 224 yards. Now, one of them was that Josh Allen scramble, which was really a passing play, but James Cook ended this game with 21 carries, 132 yards, and 2 touchdowns. The Bills rushed for 3 touchdowns. Elijah Moore also had a rushing touchdown in the second half of this game. The Jets, I think, built this defense above all else to try and stop the run. I mean, that's the reason they traded for 2 run-stopping defensive tackles at the end of the preseason. I mean, the Jets looked at their roster. They said, you know what, we can't stop the run. We better get some guys in here who can. And that's why they traded for Harrison Phillips and Jawan Briggs. And there are no simple answers as to why the Jets struggled so much against the run. I mean, part of it's James Cook's a really good back. And I think sometimes we break down these games and we forget that there's another team out there. And this week, the other team is a really good team. And they have really good players, and they have a really good back in James Cook. And that was part of the story. James Cook made some great runs. He made some great cuts to throw Jets defenders off. So give some of the credit to James Cook. But part of this is, the Jets have to be stronger in the trenches, and the linebackers have to play better. This linebacking group is supposed to be a strength for the Jets between Jamie Sherwood and Quincy Williams. And they were very bad in this game. You saw them miss tackle opportunities. You saw them maybe have some bad run fits. The Cook 44-yard touchdown run in the first half, I mean, that was just really, really bad linebacker play by the Jets. It was a great run by Cook. And that's one of the things you have to learn, is that every big play is usually part offensive player making a great play and defensive player not executing. You can't there's nothing you can do about the other team having a good running back who makes nice cuts. But you can execute your part of the play better than the Jets did. And when you talk about, what's the path forward for the Jets at 0-2, they have to start doing something well. If you do something well, you can build on it, because if you can stop the run, then you can force the other team into long downs and distances, and it becomes easier to play pass defense. I don't think that bringing in these defensive tackles to try and stop the run was necessarily a bad move, but you got to be able to stop the run. The Jets aren't doing the things that they're built to do. That's a big reason they lost this game. Is every offensive scheme and every defensive scheme has strengths and weaknesses. Every personnel group you've got has strengths and weaknesses. When you don't do your strengths well, your weaknesses are really, really going to get exposed, because your strengths are supposed to help cover your weaknesses. The Jets' ability to run the ball on offense, it's supposed to mean that they have to depend less on the passing game. Again, I think game situation maybe played more a role of it than guys not executing in the run game in this one. So we can give them a pass. We can't give the Jets run defense a pass, though. Jets run defense got a lot of praise in week 1 after they shut down Pittsburgh's rushing attack. Week 2, it did not go nearly as well. It was a completely different story. And while some of the credit goes to Buffalo, some of the blame has to go to the way these guys performed up front, particularly the linebackers, because it simply wasn't good enough. And Jets are going to have a lot of long days ahead unless they figure out this run defense. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. Try and get over the Jets loss. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.